Hi everyone, my name's Chris and today I'm taking a look at a Canon L lens which many people consider to be very good value for money. The EF 200mm f2.8 USM L2, suitable for full frame or APS-C cameras. At £600 or $800 US, it's obviously not cheap in absolute terms, but it is quite affordable compared to other such lenses. A lot of photographers aspire to own a 70 to 200mm f2.8 lens one day, like this one. They're one of the most popular and well-used camera lenses, especially by professionals. However, the Canon L lens I'm reviewing today is stuck at 200mm and it doesn't have image stabilization. But as a result, it can be smaller, lighter, and less expensive than a zoom lens, and its simpler optics could also mean that it has better image quality too. So it's still a lens of some interest to photographers who need a sharp 200mm lens that's also relatively affordable. 200mm is stepping into long telephoto territory, and on an APS-C camera it's the equivalent of 320mm, which is very long indeed. It's good for sports or event photography, but a little bit short for most wildlife photography. 200mm can give you very compressed backgrounds though, which could be good for portrait work. You'll probably have to shout your instructions and encouragements to your subject though, as they will have to be quite far away. The lens's bright maximum aperture of f2.8 is just about fast enough for you to get the shutter speeds you need for sharp pictures, which is just as well, considering this lens's lack of image stabilization. And of course, it yields some very nicely out of focus backgrounds for you. Well, let's look at the lens's build quality. It's a typical Canon L lens, being weighty and engineered with tight tolerances, as well as simply looking the business. As you've seen, it's certainly a lot smaller and lighter than a 70 to 200mm zoom lens, and less conspicuous, which can be handy. People don't often love to have gigantic camera lenses pointed at them, whatever kind of photography you're doing. The focus ring is that of a typical Canon L lens, very precise and smooth to turn, and well damped. There is full-time manual focusing, so you can turn that focus ring at any time, and the front element of the lens neither turns nor extends as you change focus. The USM autofocus motor is lightning fast, generating a mild whooshing noise as it goes. Surprisingly for a lens at this price point, there's no gasket at the back for extra weather sealing. But at the end of the day, the lens is beautifully well built and a pleasure to use. Let's look at image quality now. We'll start by testing on a full-frame camera, a 20-megapixel Canon 6D, with chromatic aberration correction and peripheral illumination turned on. At f2.8, the lens is very sharp indeed in the middle of the image with reasonably good contrast. It's not completely perfect sharpness, but it is extremely good. Let's look in the corners. It's basically the same story. Even at f2.8, this lens is very sharp indeed. Stop the aperture down to f4 and corner sharpness becomes almost perfect, and the middle of the image becomes razor sharp with a little extra boost in contrast. The lens doesn't really get any sharper at narrower apertures. So the lens gives as close to a perfect performance as you could hope for on a full-frame camera. It is very, very sharp indeed. Let's take a look at the performance on the more challenging sensor of an APS-C camera, in this case a 20-megapixel Canon 70D. At f2.8, the lens is still nice and sharp in the middle of the image. Again, not perfectly sharp, but very good indeed. The corners are a touch softer, but only a touch. It's still a nice performance. Stop the aperture down to f4 and there's a touch of extra sharpness in the corners and also back in the middle. Again, there's no further improvement on stopping the aperture down further from this point. So on an APS-C camera, the lens isn't quite as perfect as it was on full frame, but it is still very good indeed, bound to give you nice results. Let's look at distortion and vignetting. It's mostly good news. The lens displays a pinch of pincushion distortion. Any human subject you're shooting will probably appreciate this, as it'll make them look a little thinner. And even at f2.8 there's almost no vignetting, maybe just a touch of darkness right in the corners. Stop down to f4 and it's gone. Not that you could really see it in the first place. It's a great performance from this lens. The lens can focus as closely as about 1.5 meters. Not really very close, to be honest. However, close-up image quality is very good at f2.8, although you might notice just a touch of purple fringing. At f4, the picture is clean. Nice. How does this lens work against bright lights? Poorly. That's typical for a slightly older telephoto lens. We see lots of flaring and a loss of contrast. Use your lens hood. Finally, bokeh. The lens can really throw your backgrounds out of focus. The quality of its bokeh is nice and smooth, although it can look a little bit smudgy at times. Overall, the Canon EF 200mm f2.8 USM L2 is a winner. It's comparatively small and affordable, it has great autofocus and build quality, and its image quality is fantastically sharp. It's nice to handle and yields very rewarding results. You'll be getting lots of very sharp pictures for your money here. Now, a lot of people will prefer to get their hands on a 70 to 200mm image stabilized zoom lens instead of this prime lens, and that's completely fair enough. But if 200mm is what you need, and you're not bothered about image stabilization, then this is absolutely your lens, and it comes recommended.